Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we welcome back one of our more frequent guests to The Verdict.
Well, the most frequent guest. He holds the record for 20 consecutive appearances, one a year at least for our 20 years on the air. Joe Castiglione.
Absolutely, and there's plenty going on, plenty to talk about.
Oh my.
Let's get to a break and then we'll get to it. You're watching The Verdict. Joe Castiglione, today's guest.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy, on the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
This is the 20th time I've had the pleasure of introducing Joe Castiglione on our show, and you'd think that I wouldn't need any new information to use to introduce him, but there always is new information. Joe's continually making good things happen at the University of Oklahoma. I'll briefly remind you that he has been athletic director since 1998 and has, during which time the athletic teams have secured 18 national championships under his tutelage. I also want to remind you of a fact that I hope you haven't forgotten, that he was the guy that hired Bob Stoops to coach football at the University of Oklahoma, and Lincoln Riley for that matter. He was recently, well, it's been a couple of years, elected into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame, and as I indicated, this is his 20th appearance. Joe, welcome back. Always glad to see you, and I appreciate it on a football week. I appreciate you joining us.
Well, Kent, thank you very much. Mick, great to at least connect with you both through the power of technology. I'm actually not seeing you, but I'm imagining what the set looks like there. And having been on it so many different times, I wanted you all to know that right here in front of me, I have one of my most valued possessions, a Verdict coffee cup. So I'm guessing each one of you might have one in front of you today, like you always do. So I wanted to make it
right
a
here.
little bit at home.
Yeah, well, we're going to create demand. I mean, the Walmart will soon have to be stocking these after those three mentions. Joe, we're recording this show right before the West Virginia game, and I know you have a lot of sports on campus at Oklahoma, but a lot of people pay attention to the football team, and so far so good. You're undefeated.
Well, we are, and it's been a unique start to the season, as fans that are watching this show may remember. We started the season at home, which came about because of Hurricane Ida and its impact on the Gulf Coast region in general, and of course it went further up inland and did a lot of damage as it made its way through the northeastern part of the United States. But the point is, it impacted our ability to play Tulane University in New Orleans the opening weekend. And so within about 4 days, we had to put together a home football game. Tulane came here to play, and we made it happen. And in a sense, we opened the season hosting their home game, even though it was on our field. And all the proceeds from that game went back to Tulane University, and as it would have been had they hosted the home game on their field. Of course, it wasn't anywhere near like it. You know, they were probably looking at a sellout, and many of those Sooner fans were going to be in attendance too. But from there, we've been at home 2 other weeks, and this is actually our 4th home game coming up as we open the conference season against the University of West Virginia. And we just had a very special rivalry this past weekend, so at least a renewal of it for the time being. So lots happening, other sports getting underway, and as you both know, especially in the areas that you travel, college athletics has been right in the center of a lot of conversation taking place all across this country.
Yeah, Joe, one of the early criticisms of the victory for the University of Oklahoma and the University of Georgia against the NCAA in that landmark case back in 1984 was that the fear that with the colleges and universities being free to market their television rights as they see fit, without basically without NCAA restraint, that it might have the tendency to erode traditional rivalries. I was so thrilled to see that you were able to schedule a game with one of your most traditional rivals, University of Nebraska, and able to start that up. Is that something you anticipate may be a fairly regular occurrence?
Well, it certainly very well could be, Kent. We have a lot of things on the horizon for us, and there'll be some rescheduling going on. But in the case of Oklahoma and Nebraska, that was one of really 3 rivals Oklahoma had or has. When you think about the longstanding tradition that we had in the Big 8 or previous versions of the Big 8 conference prior to becoming the Big 12, the Oklahoma-Texas rivalry, which up until the time the Big 12 was formed, was a non-conference matchup. And then, of course, right here in our own state, competing against Oklahoma State University, even prior to the time they became a member of the Big 8 conference. So we were kind of in a unique spot having 3 different rivals. And so what we've tried to do is to find ways to reconnect some of those matchups. And this was the first time we've been able to make it happen in football. We've competed against Nebraska and a few other sports since conference realignment took place back in 2010, or when they left the conference. But this one was special because it also marked the 50th anniversary of the first of what's been used many times over since, but the first game ever referred to as the quote unquote game of the century, and certainly one that more than lived up to its pregame billing. It became a game, quite candidly, that helped define college football from that point forward.
Did you have quite a few participants in that game available to come back to watch this most recent version?
We really did, and that was special. When Coach Osborne, who was the offensive coordinator for Nebraska in 1971, just as Coach Switzer was for the University of Oklahoma, Chuck Fairbanks was the head coach of Oklahoma, Bob Devaney, head coach of Nebraska. But Coach Osborne has been involved in helping make this happen. He was the AD at the time we put this together. He wasn't able to travel, but we were in touch with him all throughout the week. He participated in a lot of the shows that we put together to celebrate the rivalry, even more so than just this game. But along with Coach Switzer, we had quite a few players that came back representing Oklahoma, and I'd say probably a dozen from Nebraska, including Johnny Rogers, Rich Glover, Tony Smith, Rick Bonas, several that were here, and renewed a lot of friendships. If they hadn't seen each other for that long, some have played in the NFL together and kept friendships going through that time or since. But it was really special, and we had quite a few other players that were from other eras, like Keith Jackson and J.C. Watts and Brian Bosworth, just to name a few, that were all part of the festivities. And we had Coach Stoops there at our event on Friday night, and with his new role with Fox Sports, he was right in the center of everything.
Yeah.
So it was really special. We'll go back and play Nebraska next year up in Lincoln, and then we also have 2 other games scheduled for later in the decade. Really, really special. And if anybody is watching this, we're part of the festivities last week, or we're anywhere near Norman, you could tell this atmosphere was epic, just like the old days.
Joe, we got about 30 seconds left in this segment. About how far in advance do you typically start talking to other athletic directors about scheduling a game? And what's the furthest into the future you've ever had a discussion about scheduling a football game? This, of course, without mentioning who that opponent might have been, because I know you keep that under wraps for quite a while.
Well, I know it's a very interesting question and dynamic, Mick, but literally, usually 5-10 years on the average, but I've had one now that's 18 years in advance. So that one pushed out into 2036.
Wow.
And so we have a series. We've made it public already. So it's with Clemson University. So that's the one. It's hard to try to get these teams to commit as it is, but if you don't start early enough, they will have already made other plans. That's why we work way out in the future, especially with those key marquee matchups.
Well, I just hope I'm still around to see it. I mean, that's a long time in advance. We got to get to our first break. We'll be right back. We're talking to Joe Castiglione on The Verdict.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
When I came to work for the ODVA, I started realizing the opportunity to take care of veterans. It's a powerful thing when you realize that you are taking care of people that made history.
Working here is a calling. It's really, really important that they don't just come here to exist. We want to give them meaning to their lives. We try to make life happy and meaningful and fulfilled for our veterans.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick, Cornett, Kent Meyers, and our guest, Joe Castiglione. Kent, where do you want to go from here?
Well, let's talk about going to the SEC. Joe, tell us all you can about that. I think our viewers are very interested in how that came about and what to expect.
Well, going back to the point in time when we did make our intentions known through the recommendation that we made to our Board of Regents, both President Joe Harris and I, along with several members of our staff, spent a great deal of time evaluating the University of Oklahoma, our current situation, trying to understand the massive changes that are taking place in and around college athletics, and what was best for our future. And we had also understood that all of the conferences were getting in position to meet with their television partners about renegotiating their television rights beyond the current agreements. And we needed to be forthcoming with the conference if we were going to be in the conference beyond 25 or not. And so we elected to tell them that we were not planning to be in the conference beyond 25 and that we would be exploring other opportunities. And we did just that in connecting with the Southeastern Conference and requesting to be a member of their conference beyond 25. That was by vote accepted. And then consequently, we met with our board to finalize that. We've got a great feeling for the Big 12. Obviously, there are several of us, including me, that was part of the original group that put the Big 12 together. I had a lot of connection to the Big 8 previous to that, as you all know, and we've talked about before, my 17 years at the University of Missouri. The last 5 as athletic director there, but I've been part of that conference, so had a great deal of feeling for it and still do. The conference has changed a lot. We just referenced a little of it earlier in the previous segment, but we think this is the best path forward for the University of Oklahoma that relates to our longer term stability and sustainability. Until the time we move, we will be a positive and contributing member of the Big 12. And as we announced at the time of that board meeting, that we will fulfill the contractual obligations that we've made through the remainder of those agreements, which is the 24-25 season. And then we'll also be working as we prepare to make an orderly transition to the SEC. But again, that's post 25.
Switching subjects, basketball season is just around the corner and a lot of changes in the Sooner basketball programs.
Yes, there was. Having the opportunity to do 2 coaching searches provided quite the challenge. And then replacing 2 legends in Coach Sherry Cole, 25 years as our coach, and quite candidly elevating the women's basketball program to places that not only they've never seen, in some ways may never have imagined, especially when you think about the history of women's basketball at Oklahoma prior to my arrival, and they went through a period of time when they actually dropped the sport and then brought it back quickly, but it took a lot of time to rebuild the program after that. And Coach Cole, you just have a hard time finding the right superlatives to talk about what she did with the program, the women that she recruited and developed to being great people beyond the sport of basketball, how she helped change the game, the record attendance that we have, the championships that we won, going to the brink of winning a national championship against maybe the best team ever assembled in the University of Connecticut. You just go on, and her Hall of Fame career, it's not just about basketball, but it's about elevating young women. And so that's a hard one to replace. And then while he coached for 35 years as a head coach, we had him for 10. Coach Kruger is a Hall of Fame coach in his own right and will be at some point formally. But what he did with our program, bringing it back, getting it to a Final Four, having the National Player of the Year and Buddy Hield, having a transcendent freshman and freshman of the year in college basketball, and Trae Young, who left to make himself available for the draft and is a #1 draft choice of the Atlanta Hawks, and everybody knows what he's doing with the Hawks right now. But what Coach Kruger did in connecting to people, the former players and our community, and to have successful program, those were two great ones. And so they have the blueprint, if you will, that you have to find somebody that's going to be able to take it further. And we did in hiring two great coaches that in their own right will do it in their own way, but have the same types of characteristics that will make Oklahoma basketball be successful at the highest level. So we welcome, and now we had several months to work with Coach Jenny Baranchek and her staff, and Porter Moser and his staff, and they've handled the transition, and they've been every bit of what we hoped they would be and more. They are a perfect fit.
Talk about your gymnastics program. I mean, it continues to excel and do wonderful things in regard, particularly in competitions. How do you view it?
Well, they're the gold standard, and we had a very challenging year. We could probably have an entire show of what it took to try to navigate what we've been through in those 12 to 14 months to try to even have a season last year. We won a Big 12 football title. We won the Big 12 wrestling championship. We won softball and two titles there. And then we had 5 teams finish in the top 5. 3 got to the brink of the national championship, the 2 you just mentioned, men's and women's gymnastics, along with men's golf. And then, of course, softball won the national title. But the gymnastics teams, they didn't win the national championship last year. Like I said, they finished runner-up, but it was by the narrowest of margins, a toe on the line, a tenth of a point. I mean, it's as close to winning or not winning it as you could possibly get. But that just shows that they're consistently at the top. Both of them have won multiple national championships, ranked number 1 most of the year. And, going into this season, there'll be 1 or 2 again. And that's the standard that we have under Coach Mark Williams and Coach KJ Kindler.
Joe, a year ago, college athletic programs were underwater financially because of the lack of a fan base and people unable to attend games, et cetera. Looking back now a year later, how was your department able to weather that kind of financial catastrophe?
Well, from a financial standpoint, we had a reserve fund for a rainy day. I don't think we ever had pandemic in any of that planning, but a pandemic is something that provided, its unique challenges, obviously, for everybody in every walk of life. We were dealing with something that didn't have a blueprint. There wasn't a plan that you could pull out of a file that says, what do you do in a pandemic? I mean, obviously, we're living in society in America, and it was a global impact. And we were seeing things happen literally before our own eyes. And it was hard to get information. It was hard to project. Most importantly, and I say this, and I said this last year when we were together, our number 1 goal was to make sure we protected the health, safety, and welfare of everybody under our responsibility. And yes, we wanted to find a way to practice, if we could compete, keep people together. And we did it. And we were able to have not only the success we just talked about, but financially, we were able to minimize as much of the financial impact as we
Joe,
could.
I'm going to have to interject. We've run out of time, but yeah, I mean, it's. I think we're all breathing a sigh of relief that at least people are back in the grandstands and going to events again, and we'll all cross our fingers it gets better from here. Thanks so much for being our guest once again.
Thanks, Joe.
My pleasure. We can do 2 shows on one of your questions.
That's right. Joe Castiglione, today's guest in The Verdict. Kent and I'll have a final word when we return.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Never a shortage of things to talk to Joe Castiglione about.
No, and never a shortage, it seems like, of outstanding performances by the athletic teams. He's really done a fantastic job.
He has well-rounded programs. A couple of websites for you. You can get more information on Joe and the Sooner Sports program at Soonersports.com. That's Soonersports.com. And we have a website. Love for you to log on. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see or a subject you'd like to see us discuss. Our website is theverdict.tv. Theverdict.tv. We'll see you next week.